Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. Today, we have with us John Solomon. He is an award-winning investigative journalist who helped unravel the bogus Russia collusion scandal. And John sought to create his own place for news, just like we did here at AMAC. His website, justthenews.com, prides itself on housing honest journalism by trusted reporters. John's podcast, John Solomon Reports, gives you his exclusive reporting and big newsmaker interviews every Tuesday and Thursday. It's a great podcast. I highly recommend that you check it out. John, it's an honor to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Rebecca. Such an incredible time in history, so lots to talk about.
There sure is, John, and your longtime goal has really been to rise above all the rhetoric and get honest news to the public, which we here at AMAC, we really greatly appreciate that. And you have especially shed light on the issues that many have not seen in the media. One issue that I'd like to talk with you about today is the growing public distrust of the FBI and Department of Justice, which to many Americans appears to be weaponized as a partisan force. We witnessed rogue behavior of the FBI and the DOJ concerning Trump and their invasion of his home. And even more recently, we learned of pro-life advocate Mark Huck, who woke up with his wife and 7 children to a team of FBI agents when they raided his Pennsylvania home. Now, these agents had their guns drawn. They traumatized Mark's entire family, all because he had defended his 12-year-old son from a man who was shouting profanities in his 12-year-old son's face as they were praying outside of Planned Parenthood. So our members, John, as you can imagine, they're outraged because to them, it really seems like the weaponization of the FBI and a persecution by Joe Biden's DOJ against ordinary Americans. This man certainly doesn't seem that he's a real threat. Why 1 year after the incident occurred, do you think that Joe Biden's FBI and DOJ decided to raid Mark Huck's home? And what do you think is the motive for this, what I am calling an unjust use of the FBI to target non-threatening citizens?
Yeah, listen, it troubles a lot of people, not just everyday Americans, but current and former FBI agents. There is a whistleblower by the name of Steve Friend. He's an FBI agent, highly decorated, highly respected, great performance ratings his whole career. He began speaking out this summer, saying, I'm very concerned about the FBI's use of SWAT teams and tactical teams to go make misdemeanor arrests, go make minor arrests. It's dangerous, it's unsafe, it escalates the violence. And I'm beginning to see that this is really about shock and awe, that the Justice Department just wants to intimidate people it's about to arrest that are conservative, and it needs to stop. And he's been suspended now for raising those concerns. Some of the most famous former FBI agents, including the guy who arrested the Unabomber, one of the most deadly terrorists in American history, he has said the same thing. It is insane to be using tactical teams to make misdemeanor or minor political arrests when someone can turn themselves in, or you can intercept them at the store and do it safely. That using these tactical teams come with a high risk of public safety concern, and yet they're continuing to do it. And when you listen to the people who are on the front lines, who were FBI agents or are FBI agents, they say 3 things. 1, this is a complete aberration from the practice of the FBI the last 30 years. 2, it appears to be a violation of the FBI's manual. And 3, it appears to have a political nature. All 3 of those things concern current FBI agents, former FBI agents, and of course, the American public. And the only assumption most Americans are making is this is somehow political, that the DOJ under Donald Trump with its FBI, under Joe Biden, under its FBI, has been weaponized to go after political enemies, to criminalize political differences. And I think that's the big concern America has. And I think it's an underlying sentiment that's going to have an impact in the fall elections, the midterm elections.
Yeah, I mean, first it was parents at school board meetings, John, and then we saw what happened at Mar-a-Lago, and now they're going after pro-life advocates. And I want to, touch on this agent that you mentioned. Agent Friend. He was a whistleblower, and essentially we learned that he's coming out and saying that he believes that the use of SWAT teams is excessive, especially towards nonviolent offenders. And that really raises concerns. It raises a lot of concerns for us. And we understand that there's a group of Republicans that are really stepping up and demanding answers. They're saying this agent should be reinstated. What do you think might come of it? Do you think we might see his reinstatement? And if not, what do we need to do to go at, make sure that we clean up these departments? We've got to have good transparency and accountability for the American people.
We really do, Rebecca. That is a big concern that a lot of members of Congress have. So in addition to Agent Friend, there are at least 19 other FBI whistleblowers that have come forward in the last few months. They've approached Congressman Jim Jordan, Senator Chuck Grassley, Senator Ron Johnson, Congressman James Comer, all key Republicans. If the Congress flips this fall, they will be in chairmanships and have a key role doing investigative oversight of the FBI and other federal agencies. These 20 whistleblowers all have the same story. There is a politicization of the FBI when it comes to criminal investigations, and they give real specific examples. We have the tactical team thing. That's one example that Steve Friend gave us. But other FBI agents have said, listen, the FBI in Washington opened up a criminal case on Donald Trump during the 2020 election without the proper predicate. It took information from a leftist group, pretended it was real evidence, and they opened it up just like they did in the Russia collusion case in 2016. The same agents report back to the Congress as a whistleblower that a legitimate investigation of Hunter Biden based on the laptop and other information that suggested he was doing foreign influence peddling, that was shut down because some FBI analysts, unsolicited, wrote an intelligence analyst saying all these allegations about Hunter Biden, they're Russian disinformation, when in fact they were derived from real evidence and it was a legitimate investigation. So Donald Trump gets opened up on, without predicate evidence, an investigation of Hunter Biden with predicate evidence gets shut down. That's the sort of political bias that these agents are reporting to Congress. The FBI has a long history of dealing with whistleblowers. Oftentimes, whistleblowers are routinely punished, chagrined, suspended, fired, and then years later, they get restored. A good example, there was an agent named Bassem Youssef. I had him on my TV show recently. He was one of the FBI's best counterterrorism investigators prior to 9/11. In fact, he's the agent who got credit for opening up Saudi Arabia to the FBI. Before 1998, the FBI really had no visibility into Saudi Arabia. After the Khobar Towers, this agent, Bassem Youssef, created the relationship that made the FBI cooperate for the first time with the FBI. After 9/11, he was mistaken for a Muslim agent who had said some anti-American things, maybe because of his name. He wasn't Muslim. He was Coptic Christian. He didn't make the statements, but he got sidelined. We put him on ice right after 9/11 when his skills were most needed. It took 5 years for him to get restored to full duty and to be restored to the rank and capabilities that he could put his skills back to the use for the American people. 5 years, that's probably a sign of how long some of these whistleblower cases are going to drag out. And not only was Bassem Youssef a loser, the American people were, because they were deprived of one of the most skilled counterterrorism agents for 5 years off of a false rumor, and the FBI couldn't correct itself quickly. It took 5 years to do it. It's a remarkable story.
Yeah. I mean, let's just pray, John, that even more people do stand up, for rule of law and honesty, because the American people deserve that. And we applaud Grassley for coming out and saying that the FBI should never suspend security clearances as a form of punishment or to retaliate against patriotic whistleblowers for stepping forward. So that was Senator Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson. So that is good. It'll be interesting to see what we hear. They directed that letter to the FBI director, Christopher Wray. But John, the FBI is supposed to be the lead agency for enforcing civil rights. And then, there's real terror that is threatening our security, the security of this country. And the FBI really should be putting their resources towards things like human trafficking, right? But we're not seeing that. We're seeing them put their resources towards things that seem to be important or very threatening. And we've seen so many issues going on at the southern border. My gosh. Now, Venezuela is said to be deliberately releasing violent prisoners and sending them to the U.S. border. They're essentially dumping violent criminals in our communities. Texas Congressman Troy Nehls, who you and I know very well, is leading a coalition of House Republicans who are demanding answers about Venezuela releasing prisoners early. And we also learned that Venezuela is pushing them to join caravans and head to our southern border. John, my gosh, Congressman Troy Nehls and the Republican coalition are demanding answers from Homeland Security. How serious of a concern is this, really? And what do you think we may hear from Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas?
We're probably going to hear more of the same, which is the border secure, everything's fine, don't believe your eyes, there's no crisis at the border. Now, the migrants coming across the border say there's a crisis. They're being trafficked by the cartels, extorted for money. The women are being raped. Some are dying in the river or left in the desert to die because they can't keep up with the rest of the crowd. This is a humanitarian crisis. It's a security crisis. 80 terrorists, 80 people known to have terrorism ties have crossed the border this year, an all-time record. To put in perspective, there are only 12 during the Trump years to cross. So bad people are trying to cross the border. We're interdicting them because the border is so open. And yet this administration continues to deny. They won't even send their border czar to the border. Kamala Harris will go to the DMZ border before she would go to our border. Really remarkable that she showed up in South Korea at the militarized border between North Korea and South Korea last week, but doesn't go to our border even though she's in charge of it. Here are the numbers. There are more than 2 million people that have illegally crossed that we know of, 600,000 that we know crossed but we didn't interact, so that brings it to 2.6 million. There are 80 people, as I said, who have terrorist ties who've crossed the border. More than 800 people, 2.5 times the highest prior record, have died on their journey here near the border, either being left in the desert, drowning in a river, or left in a hot car or truck to die. Those numbers are a crisis no matter what Mayorka says, no matter what Kamala Harris says. And most Americans are going to trust their eyes, not the political spin. I think this is going to be a big issue in the November election.
Not to mention all of the people that are dying from these illegal drugs that are coming over. This fentanyl is killing our children. Human trafficking. These are real serious concerns. And security, John, it is really of growing concern to Americans. And that brings me to another question. With the growth of technology comes this heightened danger of hackers exploiting our personal information. The FBI is supposed to monitor this invasive activity and treat it as a form of terrorism. But JustTheNews.com recently wrote an article about how law enforcement agencies at every level of government are buying data from private third parties. Is this a common practice, or is this excessive overreach? Could it be weaponized? If so, for what? And how might it be weaponized?
That is a great question. It wasn't a common practice a few years ago, but everybody has a smartphone these days. Everybody downloads apps. When you download the app, no one typically reads the fine print of the privacy terms, but those apps collect your data as you're going around the neighborhood or going around your state or you're traveling. Your phone is literally leaving little geospatial tags about every step, everywhere you were, a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. That data is commercially sold to third parties, and the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, it isn't limited to the FBI, are obtaining that data without a warrant. They're just buying it like they're commercial brokers. This is an instance where the telephone communication laws haven't kept up with the technology in America. When you were a rotary dial phone, people didn't have to worry about it was tracking you down the street, but your mobile phone can. The data brokers are collecting that data. They're making it available. They're selling it, and the government's involved in buying it. We know the CDC did it to track people's compliance with vaccine mandates and mask mandates and separation mandates and all the protocols for COVID-19. We know the FBI is doing it. We know local and state law enforcement are doing it. This is a place where the Congress has to step into the void, put new privacy laws that say, listen, if a law enforcement agency needs that data, they should go to a court like they do for other telephone data and get a warrant and justify their actions, not just buy it or have someone donate it to them as part of a criminal investigation. So this is going to come to a head next year. The House Judiciary Committee, Senate Judiciary Committee are all looking at this as a potential privacy violation. And I think you're going to see legislation forthcoming next year, but it has gone from not in practice at all to being extraordinarily widespread.
Yeah, and you mentioned Congress has got to do the work here, and that's why we're hoping for good people elected to Congress this November. What is your hope for the future of America? We're nearly 30 days away from the November 8th elections. How hopeful are you that we might see a red wave?
Well, listen, I think there are indications in the polls that Americans prefer Republicans over Democrats. That's an unusual thing in the generic poll. Normally, Democrats have an advantage even in a bad year. That's one sign. Hispanic voters are moving much more to the red column. You saw Mayra Flores in Texas capture a seat that hadn't been in Republican control for 150 years at the border. That suggests the border issue is not only affecting people at the border, but maybe interior states are also seeing that same concern. Hispanic voters, white voters, black voters, all alike very concerned about the border. And then I think crime is becoming a third factor. We see Americans say that crime is one of the primary reasons they're going to go to the poll. Democrats own the defund the police narrative. They own the no cash bail narrative. And so that could be a boomerang. And then finally, the economy, inflation, gas prices are eating into everybody's wallet. Everybody feels like their budget went backwards a few steps last year. And as a result, 70 to 81% of Americans say this country is on the wrong path. So wrong path, concerned about inflation, concerned about crime, concerned about border, and a growing shift of Hispanics to Republicans. It certainly lines up for a midterm election where Republicans could capture both chambers, but it's still a very divided country. These are all close margins. There's still the uncertainty of absentee voting in some of these key states like Pennsylvania, where just the other day a government official said it could be 2 weeks before we have some races settled. So we have to watch the integrity issues as this election unfolds. But right now, the momentum seems to be with Republicans. And I would not be surprised if Republicans picked up a couple of seats in the Senate and maybe 15 to 29 seats in the House.
Yeah. And we know that the left and Joe Biden is supporting these folks that have such extreme positions. It is a divided nation. We have a president who said it himself when he called people like you and I, John, extremists, because we believe in the values that really put America first. So I hope to all of our listeners, talk to friends and family, make sure that we get out and vote, and think about all of those things. Is the Biden administration doing a good job in the way of inflation? They're spending like crazy. What about crime? We see crime is the worst in Democrat-led cities. And the list goes on and on. He's ignoring the trouble at the southern border. We've got big things to be concerned about right here at home and overseas. So we'll be watching how everything pans out this November. And John, I'd love to have you come back and join us after the midterm elections. You know, you're just a great guy to have on. It'll be interesting to look at where we're at. We'll only just be able to then roll up our sleeves and get to it because there will be so much work for us to do yet. But this was a complete honor to have you with me here today. Thank you so much.
It's an honor to be with you guys. I love what AMAC does. As a journalist, I check you guys often. You have so much valuable information on your site. So what an honor to be on your podcast.
Well, you do too, John. I want to encourage our listeners, go to justthenews.com and to like and listen and follow your podcast. It's excellent. John Solomon Reports. Excellent podcast. John, thank you so much because your passion for journalism and dedication is really so refreshing. Thank you for speaking out and continue fighting the good fight. God bless you.
Good to be with you.
And to all of you AMACers out there listening, thank you for tuning in today. If you're not getting your political news from AMAC, you won't be informed about American politics. You can track breaking news and more like this by downloading our AMAC News app. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and have a great day, everyone.